Sometimes you might want to colour in your colouring pages digitally on a computer. This is a good way to show potential customers or email subscribers what your colouring pages look like when they've all been coloured in, but without having to go to the effort of printing it out and colouring in with pens yourself, and then having to worry about taking a good picture of it or scanning it in to get it onto your website. You might also want to colour in line art graphics that you've purchased somewhere to use them in your other printables. So let's say, for example, you bought the pumpkin and coffee cups that you can see on my design on the screen, and you want to create a wall art picture with them, but you want them in colour. You can use the same technique that I'm going to show you in this video to colour in your line graphics, as well as colouring in your colouring pages. The first thing we want to do is to flatten all of our layers into one, because that's going to make it easier for us to colour. To do this, go to Layer in the top menu and then click Flatten Image. If you've got any hidden layers, it's going to ask you if you want to get rid of them. Click OK. So now you can see all of our layers have been condensed into just one. Now, to make sure we don't accidentally save over our original file, I'm just going to go ahead and save this as something different by clicking File and Save As. So I'm just going to call this Coloured Version and click OK. So now I've got this saved separately, which means that I'm not accidentally going to override my original version with all those different layers with my flattened version. So now we're working on a new file. And what we want to do is we want to move our background layer onto a new layer, which will enable us to colour it in. Press Ctrl and A on your keyboard to select everything, and then Ctrl and X to cut, and Ctrl and V to paste. If we look at our layers panel, we can see that now our colouring page is a separate layer to the background. I'm going to zoom in a bit with Ctrl and plus to make it a bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. The first thing I'm going to colour in is the pumpkin. Go down to the bottom left where you've got your colours and choose a suitable colour for the first thing that you want to colour in. So I'm going to choose a nice bright orange. Next, go to the brush tool. Make sure your brush is a good size for the size of what you want to colour in, and put the hardness to 100%. We're going to make a new layer for us to do our colouring on. So click Layer, and then in this menu at the top, New Layer. When you're colouring in, every single different colour that you use, you're going to put on a new layer. So it's important to name your layers something sensible so that you can find them again later. I'm going to call this one Orange Pumpkin and click OK. Now we could just start clicking with our brush tool to colour in, but you can see what this is doing is it's going over the lines, and that's not going to be a very good way to colour it in because we're going to lose all our black lines. So if I undo that, I'll show you how we can colour in while still keeping all of the black lines. The first thing we want to do is to get our colouring layer, which we've just created, and click and drag it underneath our colouring page. Next, go to the colouring page layer and double click on the right hand side. In the blend mode option, which is the drop down at the top, change it to where it says multiply and then click OK. Click back onto your orange pumpkin layer, or whatever it is you've called yours, and now when you use the brush tool, you can see you're colouring in, but it's still keeping all of those black lines. And the reason it's doing that is because you set that blend mode to multiply. This has made all of the white parts of your colouring page go transparent so that you can see the colours underneath, but the black lines are still there. So now we can colour in. I'm just going to choose a slightly bigger brush, colour in all of the orange that we want. Okay, so now I've got all my orange coloured in, but you can see I've gone outside of the lines in a few places, which is not very good. If you do that, to fix it, simply go to the eraser tool, choose a eraser size, and then make sure your hardness is 100%. It's easier if you zoom in using Ctrl and plus, and then all you need to do is click and drag with your mouse around the edges, and it will erase all of your colour that's gone outside of the lines. I've used my eraser tool to go through all those messy edges, and I've now tidied them up so my pumpkin is nicely coloured in. When you're ready to change to a new colour, simply make a new layer by clicking Layer, New Layer, and then give it a name of what you want to colour in next. So let's go swirls on coffee cup. But I'm going to do them in two colours, so let's call it pink swirls on coffee cup. Okay, now I've got a new layer. I can go down to the bottom and change my colour. So let's make it a nice pink colour. And now we're ready to start colouring in the next thing. I'm going to colour in some of the swirls on this coffee cup, but I'm going to use a slightly different method to make it even easier. So I'm going to click on my colouring layer, which has all of the design on it, go to my magic wand tool, and then I'm going to make sure that this contiguous box is ticked because I want to just select certain parts of the white. If that wasn't ticked, it would select every single thing that's white, and then I'd end up colouring in the whole thing in pink, which I don't want to do. So untick it. Oops, no, sorry, tick it. Got that the wrong way around. Make sure it's ticked, and then we can just select certain things. So with my magic wand tool and the colouring layer selected, I'm going to go through and hold the Shift key on my keyboard and just click in to different parts of these swirls, so I can select the ones that I want to make pink. Having the Shift key pressed means you can select multiple things at the same time, which is going to make it much quicker for us to colour it in. So I'm going ahead and selecting every other swirl because I'm going to alternate this between pink and purple. When you've got all the parts selected that you want to colour in, click onto your colour layer, so mine is my pink swirls layer, go down to the fill tool in the tools palette, and then move your mouse to one of the bits that you've selected and simply click. And Photoshop will fill in every single bit you've selected with that colour. So that was much quicker than going through each swirl with the brush tool individually. I'm going to do it again, but make the rest of the swirls purple. So I'm going to make a new layer. You can click Layer, New Layer, or simply hit Ctrl, Shift and N on your keyboard. Give it a name, so purple swirls on coffee cup. And this time I'm going to get my magic wand tool, go back to my colouring layer and select all of the swirly bits that I missed on the first go round, and these ones are going to be purple. If you accidentally select something you didn't mean to, you can let go of the Shift key on your keyboard and then click Ctrl and Z to undo that last selection, and then start again by pressing the Shift key, and then you can continue selecting everything. So I've got all my swirls done. I'm going to click to my purple swirls layer, change my brush colour to purple, and then get my fill tool selected, go over to one of my bits that I've selected and simply click, and it's coloured those all in purple for me. Just like anything else in Photoshop, when you're colouring in, you can add fancy layer styles to your colours as well. This can help create some depth to make it look a little bit more interesting and visually appealing. For example, on these swirls, I could go over to the layer, double click on the right hand side to bring up the layer styles, and then go down to where it says Inner Glow. I'm going to change the blend mode to normal, put the opacity up a bit, and then in the colour box I'm going to click in, select my purple, and then just make it a little bit darker. Drag the size and the opacity, and I'm going to actually make it even darker still. And now you can see I've got a fancy inner glow on all of this purple, which is making it look a bit more 3D than it did before. If I just hide that you can see the difference that adding an inner glow will make. Doing things like inner glows works really well when you've got a smaller shape. So these swirls are quite small, they're quite thin, which means there's lots of edges for that inner glow to take effect. However, on things like our pumpkin, it's not going to be as effective, and I'll show you why. So if I add an inner glow to the pumpkin, hopefully you can see, but all it's done is added the glow to the inside of the pumpkin, because that's the edge of where our orange colouring is. What it hasn't done is add that glow around all the rest of the black lines, so it's not actually looking that great at the moment. I'm going to cancel out of that and show you a way that you can add depth and shading to your colouring blocks of colour. So we're going to add a bit of a darker orange shading around all of these black lines on the pumpkin to make it look more 3D and just make it look a little bit better. So I've got my orange pumpkin layer selected. I'm going to make a new layer, and then, oops, I forgot to rename it, so I can just double click on the layer and I'll call it Orange Pumpkin Shading. You want to make sure when you're shading that your layer is on top of the main colour, otherwise you won't see it. Go into your colour picker and choose the colour that you're wanting to add the shading to, and then just go ahead and select a slightly darker version. Go to your brush tool, and we want to select quite a small brush that's just wider than the lines that we want to add the shading around. Take the hardness down to 0%, and now all we need to do, if we just zoom in, is just click and drag with your brush tool around all of the black lines to add that little subtle bit of shading around them. I've gone through the whole of my pumpkin and I've done those lines around all of the black lines on that pumpkin. So now you can see it's got some nice depth to it and it's looking a little bit 3D. However, I've decided I don't like the colour of this pumpkin because it's a bit too brown. It's not very nice and vibrant orange, so I want to change the colour. To do this, all you need to do is choose the layer that you want to change the colour of, double click to open up the layer styles, and then go to Colour Overlay. This will let you change the colour to whatever you want it to be. So I could choose a nice bright orange for my pumpkin. That's now making the shading look like the wrong colour, so I can do exactly the same on that one. So choose that original orange. I'm just going to make it a bit darker. And if you can't find a perfect colour for your overlay that you're happy with, one thing you can do is go back to the blending options and just drag the opacity down to make it a little bit less obvious. Okay, so now my shading is still there. If I just hide that layer and put it back on, you can see the difference it's making. So it's really subtle, but it instantly ups the quality of the colouring in that you're doing in Photoshop. So now that you've mastered the basics of colouring in using Photoshop, you can use those exact same techniques to colour in the whole of your colouring page.